Tonight we'll be talking with four of the most famous entertainers, in fact, the four most famous entertainers in the history of the world. The Beatles.
To get your money to buy a thing.
The Beatles, who were guests of the Queen City this past week, are on top of the entertainment world. They've succeeded where others have failed. They've written history as they've lived it, and never again will the world feel as great an impact on the young people as that caused by the British foursome. But there's the sad side, too. They were literally run out of the Philippines. They were scored for their acceptance of a high-level medal from their own queen. They were ostracized because they had the courage to say what they feel. Now that the controversies have died down, at least for the time being, it's time to find out what the Beatles are really like. Tonight, you are going to hear some personal interviews with the Beatles. They gave us the time to talk to them privately between concerts here in Seattle. What you're about to hear is exclusive. The first interview is with Paul.
What about Memphis? There was some talk earlier about you possibly recording an album there. Are you ever going to record an album in the United States?
Well, if the price comes down, we might.
What's the matter with the price?
I don't know. When we went there, I forget what it was, but it was some ridiculous price they wanted us to pay to record. I don't know if it was them or it was the people who wanted the royalties or something. But it's about 1,000 times what we pay in England, and we just thought, forget it, Memphis sound or not, we'll get the London sound. It's easier and cheaper.
Let me ask you one more thing, and I know you must be concerned about the rumors, Paul, that were going around about the marriage. There was quite a bit of rumor about it supposedly happening here in Seattle. What can you say about it?
I can say I'm not concerned in the least, man. Really. I mean, I've never been so unconcerned, because this is about the third year I've had this one. The first year I used to try and put people straight and say, I'm not married, and all that business, but now, I just forget it, I don't care if people think I'm like, I've got 10 wives and divorced them all, I'm not married.
What I was referring to was Seattle, here specifically. There had been a very definite rumor about it happening tonight. We had reports that Jane was flying in, and a honeymoon suite was rented and everything, and I guess they were very grossly exaggerated. Did you hear anything about it prior to coming?
How can you exaggerate something that is never there? It's just not even there to be exaggerated on. It was just made up completely, but that's an occupational hazard with us. People just make things up about us.
George Harrison.
George, I don't know if you'll remember it, but I'm one of the disc jockeys that called you last year on your birthday.
Did you?
In London, and you were in a recording session. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was not last year, was it?
This year, I'm sorry, in February of this year.
Yeah, that's right. Hello.
You were in a recording session, and you couldn't hear us, and the connection was bad, and...
Yeah, that's right. Usually is at the recording session. What connections?
What were you recording in that session?
Oh, I've no idea at all. It must have been Revolver.
Was it Revolver?
No, not Revolver. It must have been Rubber Soul, was it?
No, probably Yesterday and Today.
Well, Yesterday and Today wasn't. We never actually recorded that.
Just a combination of singles. And
this is Rubber Soul, Revolver, and all the old ones stuck together on an album.
Still have the supermarket?
Well, we don't have it. I don't have it. Some fella's got it.
You own it, though, right?
Well, we bought it, but it's this other fellow who's running it, and it's for him, It's nothing to do with us, really.
It's always nice to talk to a fellow Pisces. My birthday's February 26th, the day after yours, and it's, I often wondered if the same things will happen to me, that have happened to you in your lifetime. Did you ever believe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that this was going to happen this way?
No, I never thought about it. We never expected anything, really. And so, it's just magic. It just happened.
How much writing are you doing now? I know you have a couple of cuts on the Revolver album. Are you devoting a little more time to your writing?
Not really, no. I'd like to write more, but I probably won't do any more writing until we need another album, and then I'll start writing then. But I may write more after this tour. I don't know. It depends. But you don't get round to picking up your guitar once you're off stage when you're on a tour, because it's traveling. There's not much time to sit and relax, so you don't tend to write many songs touring.
Ideas for songs must come at like 3 in the morning or driving down the street in a car or something. What do you do if you get an idea? If you don't have your guitar right with you at all times, you stop, write it down?
Keep it in my head. You can't write it down, really, unless you're a musician and you can write down the music notation. But you just keep it in your head. I've got a tape recorder in the car as well, so you can sort of sing onto that and then work on it when you get home.
Ringo Starr, real name Richard Starkey. Right now, Ringo has the #1 record. It's called Yellow Submarine.
Ringo, Yellow Submarine, who does the voices in the background, sir?
Which voices, sir?
The voices of,
John
90.
and Paul are the other voices besides me. All the singing is all of us. I mean, all the, the happy and yours.
Right. I'm talking about the voices, full speed ahead. Yeah.
That's John and Paul.
They're doing it all?
Myself, yes.
And yourself?
Yes.
Is that the most fun song you've sung as a Beatle?
Yeah, it was great,
You think so?
It's strictly fun, yeah. I think the funniest one I've ever made. Well, it's up to you.
What do you do with your leisure time when you have it, if and when?
Well, we only have it in Britain, really. But on tour, you're talking about this tour or when I'm home?
No, when you're home and when you have an hour's free time with nothing to do.
An hour's free time, you can't do. Well, I just sit around, play records, watch TV, do anything, walk in the garden, feed the dogs. I just do anything, read the papers,
You read very much?
Well, it depends. I do it in phases, I'll have a phase for about 3 months where I won't stop. Then I'll lose a book. And then I'll, just stop like that for a couple of months and then start again. It's just up and down like that. It's never steady, never constant,
Have you found the fans on this tour to be less responsive than ever before on the previous 2 American tours?
No. The only place there's less responses at airports and places like that. Because, well, I hope, because they're wise enough, because they never see us at airports or outside of places anymore. Because they used to all be there, the police are so busy getting us in, and they're still getting us in now, and people aren't there really, there's never that many.
Let me ask you about...
because they've wised up, actually, that bit, and I think it's great.
Let me ask you about the incident in the Philippines,
Yeah?
if I may. What
You
happened?
can ask me what you like. Well, I don't know, that's still a mystery to me, just that we... never heard, we had an invitation to go to this luncheon or something, and we didn't hear about it. And everybody else arrived, and there was a TV station there filming everything, which they shouldn't have been doing anyway, so that was like a cheat. And, then they just showed a half-hour show of everyone waiting around, and we didn't arrive, so, we looked terrible. It did look terrible, the show, but it was nothing to do with us. We didn't know anything about it. Then we got to the airport, and people started shouting and pushing us around, And I didn't get kicked or anything like I read in a paper. I just got pushed around with everyone else. Alf is the only one he's our road manager, who really got injured, he had a bad back and everything.
John Lennon.
I've read both of your books. Are you planning on doing something else in the near future?
Well, I am writing, so I suppose I'll make it into a book.
Regards to songwriting, have you ever attempted to, or would you attempt to write anything on your own without Paul or with another writer?
Well, I've written many things without Paul before, for years. We've always written together and separately.
What about with, say, another writer?
Another writer I don't need, George maybe, I'd write with him.
What do you do when you get an idea for a song? If you're driving down the street, you don't have your guitar with you at all times, or...
If I'm driving down the street, I can't afford to have ideas for songs. I've got to concentrate on driving. But you mean if it comes, like sometimes they come on the way home from somewhere or something, so I just sort of try and keep the bit in my head all the way home while people are talking. I'm going, trying to remember it.
I guess the most asked question of you on this tour had to be the Datebook magazine quote. I'm not going to go into that because I know you've heard plenty about it.
Plenty, there's only a few answers or reasons I can give, and I've given them so many times.
I think it's a shame that you were quoted out of context like you were, and the idea wasn't presented as you had said it. I read the article myself about 7 times, and it makes sense when you read the article.
It does a bit more, even I doubted how much sense the whole article meant because I'd forgotten it was that unimportant, it had been and gone. So I had to reread the whole article to make sure I wasn't, I hadn't said anything I didn't mean, properly. That I'd got lost.
What's the first thing you're going to do when you get back home?
Probably, I might kiss the wife when I get in, and then go to sleep.
Like any other intelligent person, John Lennon has some definite views on Christianity, and he expressed them freely, as he should have. Well, he said, and I quote him, "Christianity will go. It will vanish and shrink. I needn't argue about that. I'm right, and I will be proved right. We are more popular than Jesus. I don't know which will go first, rock and roll or Christianity." Unquote. Oh, was that a slam on religion? No, it was a slam on those who ignore it. John doesn't claim to be a religious person, but he is deeply interested and concerned with religion. And he deplores the fact that in England, a group like his own Beatles can actually have a wider, more faithful following than the church. But the reprinted text made John look like he was putting down the church. At least that was the story of some publicity-hungry disc jockeys in the South. They organized anti-Beatle demonstrations. They banned Beatle records from their radio stations which, for the most part, had never played a Beatle record. I'd like to play for you now the disc jockey's voice, the disc jockey that started the controversy in Birmingham, Alabama. He works for a radio station that never did play Beatle music. It's a country and western radio station. They play cowboy music, but they decided it was a good chance for some publicity. We have for you now the voice of that disc jockey. His name is Tommy James.
The response so far has just been sensational. Here in Birmingham, we've had a 99% cooperative attitude, and as you may have heard all across the country, the stations are jumping on the bandwagon. And I think within another 10 days to 2 weeks, you're going to see a tremendous increase in the number of stations that have banned the Beatle records. And I think this is good. It came about because of a magazine article in Date Book magazine reprinting an interview in London with Maureen Cleave, in which John Lennon was quoted as saying Christianity was on its way out and that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus Christ, and we felt that it was so absurd and such an insane statement. We felt we had a public service to do, and we banned the Beatle records. We've also asked our listeners to bring all of their Beatle paraphernalia and Beatlemania to the station. We have a big bonfire scheduled for August 19th. I just talked to the reporter, and he asked me about my religious affiliation and if I was a religious fanatic or something, and I gave him my answer that I was not, and I attended church sort of regularly, but this had nothing to do with it. It was just that I was completely revulsed by the idea that a group like the Beatles, who are idolized by so many young people, could come out and make a statement like this. I just think their responsibility should grow up with their success. We've had no protests locally against our action. However, across the country there have been some dissenting voices about our action, and those who are defending the Beatles as having a right to say whatever they say. Locally, though, it's almost been 100% in our favor. I think we're running nationally about 75 to 85% in favor of the movement.
But apparently that was not the case in England.
Although the Beatles aren't commenting, the reporter who interviewed John Lennon on those controversial remarks about Christianity says they are being distorted out of their true context. The London newspaper woman, Maureen Cleave, told me John Lennon did not intend to sound irreverent.
I'm astonished that John Lennon's quotation should have been taken out of the context of my article and misinterpreted in this way. I do not think for one moment that he intended to be flippant or irreverent. He was certainly not comparing the Beatles with Christ. He was simply observing that so weak was the state of Christianity that the Beatles were, to many, better known. He was deploring rather than approving this. Sections of the American public seem to have been given an impression of his views that is totally absurd.
The Music Men of Denmark Street, that's the British equivalent of Tin Pan Alley, are assessing the storm in the United States over John Lennon's remarks about Christianity. The managers and promoters are worried about the effect the uproar might have on other British groups performing in the United States. Public relations man Les Perrin, who promotes Herman and his Hermits, seems more concerned about who is behind the anti-Beatle campaign in the U.S.
I wonder why it was motivated and what is behind it. It is unfortunate when entertainers decide to go into matters of religion, politics, because, to me, primarily, their job is to entertain.
Public relations man Les Perrin, and this is George Lindsay reporting from London.
Beatles manager Brian Epstein.
The quote which John Lennon made to a London columnist more than 3 months ago has been quoted and represented entirely out of context. Lennon is deeply interested in religion and was at the time having serious talks with Maureen Cleave, who is both a friend of the Beatles and a representative for the London Evening Standard. What he said and meant was that he was astonished that in the last 50 years, the Church in England, and therefore Christ, had suffered a decline in interest. He did not mean to boast about the Beatles' fame. He meant to point out that the Beatles' effect appeared to be, to him, a more immediate one upon certainly the younger generation.